You're listening to Bolivia, Political Crossroads, where we give a summary and analysis of the developments in Bolivia's political landscape, starting with the controversial general elections held in October of 2019, which sparked 3 weeks of protest and general civil unrest that eventually led to the resignation of ex-President Evo Morales. We'll continue following developments as they unfold through the new elections set for May 3rd of this year. Your hosts for the program are Ernesto Machicao and Paul Rackner. Ernesto, a La Paz native residing in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, is an experienced lawyer and political analyst who in the past has also participated actively in the political arena. Paul is an American-born Bolivian with a background in Latin American studies and also resides in Santa Cruz. You can follow us on Facebook. Our page bears the same name as this podcast, and we encourage and welcome your comments and suggestions. Thanks for listening. Welcome, everybody, to episode 9 of Bolivia Political Crossroads. Today we're going to talk about a little of everything. Gerrymandering, the officialized candidacies. Evo Morales has decided he wants to run for senator for Cochabamba.
It has caused a turmoil in Bolivia, and it has not only political repercussions, but legal repercussions too.
Yeah, there's a lot we can dive into there. And, we were talking before the program or before we started recording about
it is February the 5th.
Today is February 5th.
Right.
That's correct.
Yep. Wednesday.
Yep. For those of you keeping track. We could start with this whole gerrymandering thing, Ernesto. I have to admit, it's something I really don't know anything about or much about. Mm-hmm. I understand the concept, and you hear it in U.S. politics here and there. But as applied to Bolivia, probably never would have given it any thought at all had you not brought it up. And a few things have popped up on social media about the what do you call those, the circumscriptions?
Circumscriptions.
I don't know what the voting districts. That's the term in English.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And how those are defined. So it's
right.
It's pretty interesting. I'll let you. You've definitely done your homework on it. So
well, when I was in high school, I read this U.S. civics book, and I learned there what was gerrymandering. It was hard to understand it then because it was like physics for me. I didn't have any idea about this. And finally learned it. And when I went to the States to study, I somewhat looked at it. It wasn't also a thing to study in school, because I studied politics, but we never looked at gerrymandering, how it was constructed. It was just understood that it was a big political issue in the States, and that as a big political issue, it goes to a legislative, it goes to a state legislature, and the state legislature, along with the governor, they determine where to draw the lines of the districts, which is a very political exercise because it depends where you draw the line, and that district can become Republican or can become Democrat, depending where you draw the line exactly, And the same happens anywhere in the world.
Yep.
If you draw the line in a place, in Bolivia, that can be a mass district. If you draw it somewhere else, it can be a political party from the right, And in Bolivia, something has happened. It's not only drawing the line in the map in Bolivia since 2005, really, with 2006 with Evo. As you mentioned before, in Bolivia this was never a big issue. For some reason, I don't understand, Paul. There are certain things that do not become an issue in Bolivia. For example, just to make the point, the issue about divorce. It hasn't really never been an issue in Bolivia. And all of a sudden, one day, I don't remember in what year, divorce became legal, and that was it, But there wasn't a big discussion.
It used to not be legal.
No, it wasn't a big thing, Abortion. Did you ever hear something about abortion in Bolivia?
A little bit.
A little bit, but it's nothing. Nobody puts his life at issue because of that, Nobody goes out in a march or go to the radio or to a TV station and have a big debate and point the issues, the issues against, the issues for. That's not really an issue in Bolivia, And gerrymandering is not an issue in Bolivia. It has never been an issue in Bolivia. Yet Bolivia is a very politicized country. Everybody here speaks about politics every day, but gerrymandering has never been a discussion between political parties.
I think the thing is just at first, my first instinct is to say it's such an abstract idea for a lot of people where they just don't get why it's important. Because it is kind of, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it.
Because if you look at it, and I think that's interesting that we discuss this, because it's an antecedente, it's like a prologue of a book,
Mm.
Before Evo was elected, it was very hard to redistrict Bolivia and say these guys are from the MNR and this guy's from ADN and this guy's from the MIR.
From the different political parties.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do that. It probably could have been done, but not as clearly.
Mm-hmm.
When the MAS gets in government, for the MAS it was clear as water, because the regions of Bolivia where there are indigenous people.
It's an ethnicized political
it's an ethnic
party.
thing. So that like in the States, it's a racial thing.
Uh-huh.
Indians are basically in certain areas of the country, especially in the rural areas, in the eastern part of the country, in the western part of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So their gerrymandering was simple. If you give more weight to those areas
Mm-hmm.
in terms of electing more representatives, more diputados, then you're doing the right gerrymandering in favor of the MAS. And that's exactly what they did.
Yep.
They put an electoral court of their favor. That was the first thing they did.
Mm-hmm.
And once they had those guys there, they instructed them to do gerrymandering in the way that it would benefit them. And basically what they did was that, they said, okay, in the rural areas where Aymaras and Quechuas are living, we will do the following. They will elect more diputados than the citizen, than people that live in the cities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what they did. So the end result, I think it's easier to explain it this way. In 2005, in December, the election was won by the MAS. The MAS obtained 54% of
Evo Morales.
Evo Morales, the 54% of the popular vote.
Yep.
But in Congress, he was close to 2/3. He didn't have 2/3, but it was very close to 2/3.
Mm-hmm.
2/3 is what? 66%.
It was like
Yeah.
64, 65.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was way above his vote. He got 54 in the streets, and he in the ballots, and he got in Congress close to 2/3.
Mm-hmm. Which is a significant difference.
And that was gerrymandering, right? And as I recall from that time, it wasn't done in one day.
Also,
He did it slowly. Progressively, he did that.
But there's also another factor there, that there's certain Senate and House seats that correspond to indigenous, I don't want to say indigenous communities, or
Good, you pointed that out. Yes.
that are basically created. I don't remember how they somehow it doesn't go exactly along with.
There's 7 of those.
Thank you. Yeah, there's 7. I knew didn't know the specific number, and they're also not voted in, at least in my understanding, in the same way
That's
that
correct.
the rest of
The
them
rest.
are voted in through a general election.
Right.
They're basically, it's a group discussion where they decide who's gonna.
What they
Who's
did
gonna
with those
represent them,
seven
right?
representatives, they said, okay, although there are indigenous people or Indians all throughout Bolivia, right? Then you could do that throughout Bolivia, but you can't. What the MAS did is they said, okay, there are certain points of Bolivia where it's undoubtedly that these guys were original from. So they said, the Guaranis, for example, they're basically from the region and southern
Eastern.
of Santa, southern from this city.
Yep.
I don't know how far, I think like 100, 150 kilometers. There they have una región autónoma, an autonomous region, indigenous autonomous region. And yes, they elect one deputy there, right?
Right.
And what they wrote on the law is that they don't have to abide by the one person, one vote. They can go by the ways and means, by the traditional ways and means
Uh-huh.
of those communities.
Yeah, that's when I said it's kind of like a group discussion. You know,
Right. So
maybe I'm
if in
but-
that section of Bolivia, region of Bolivia, the Guaraníes voted like we did, then they would respect that. If they never voted like we did and they had meetings in the community, then they say, okay, let the community have meetings and elect that way their representatives. So there are 7 of those.
Okay.
Yeah. And basically that was a guarantee that the 7 guys will be from the MAS, because the MAS is the only party that really has representation from the indigenous population in Bolivia, as we mentioned that before in previous podcasts.
Yeah.
So episodes. So there you have 3 issues in Bolivia. You have the gerrymandering, normal gerrymandering, that has been distorted by the MAS, giving more weight to the rural areas where there are Aymaras and Quechuas. They gave a lot of weight to that. That's why you have a result of 54% of the vote.
Something that bears mentioning. Sorry, I didn't mean to, but it's important that people know, at least the people who aren't aware. Bolivia's had a shift. The demographic has gone basically from 40% urban, 60% rural, to the opposite. It's 40% rural and 60% urban over the basically since the 1980s up until now.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about adding more weight to the rural populations, that might not have sounded strange when the rural population was the vast majority.
Right.
But now it's flip flopped. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Continue.
So that's what happened, and we are going to a new election now, where this system hasn't been modified. We are respecting up to this date the gerrymandering by Evo Morales with his party, the MAS, and that's not correct. We must change that.
Do you think that's going to happen? Because what you're saying is that before we hit record is that the electoral tribune it's up to them and they can change it.
This is a historical podcast episode. We start a campaign now here. We go follow in Twitter, and we follow it in Facebook and see what happens, because it has to be done. Even to the point, and this is my opinion, even if we have to postpone the election, because this is no joke. What can happen in this election is Evo Morales can get, 30% of the vote, but half of the people in Congress can be his people because of this distortion, right?
Right.
So if you have another president in the seat the next period, you'll have a president that will have half of the people in Congress against him because they were elected under a distorted system. And that makes Bolivia ungovernable. And so there's no, in my opinion, there's no other solution to this other than to address the problem. And if this takes 1 month to address it, be it that way. So be it, because it's worth doing it. It's worth doing it right. It's not an impossible task. It's doable.
No, it'd be interesting.
It'll just take time, and we have to have a better system. We cannot live with this old system. I think I'm definitely going to have a personal campaign here starting today, because I believe in this. Yeah, it has to be changed.
Nice.
And there are many people that are talking about it right now in the different, in WhatsApp and Facebook, but people don't know what the way to do it, which is the road that you have to do. Previous to this discussion, I was under the impression that it was Congress, the Bolivian Congress, that did it. It's not. That's why it's not a political issue. It's not a big issue in Bolivia. It's not a discussion issue. It's done by the tribunal, by the electoral tribunal. Yeah. So the electoral tribunal has the faculty to do this. They have the powers to do this, and they should do it. You don't need Congress for this, in other words.
They better get started.
Yep.
Because I'm curious as to how long a process that is, and if they remapped the districts. I guess that would have been for the election in 2009 or 2010 when Evo was reelected the first time, right? Because that's when they approved the new constitution. That's what I assume. But I'm sure there's a way to find that out. And how'd they go about it? But no, it's definitely a good point and something that needs to be considered.
But it's good that you touched that. The way they do it here is that every time there's a census, they redistrict in
But they do that every 10 years.
Yeah. But see,
2010, I think, was it 2010, the last one?
I quite don't recall.
That sounds
but
right. We're due.
It's ways down, yeah. But the point is that they do it when they redistrict when there are new censuses, right? And that makes sense because population shifts take place every 10 years, well, throughout the 10 years.
Yeah.
And you'll see the result of this reshaping of the demographics every 10 years, and you have to reshape Congress too every 10 years. But this is an emergency situation because it has been distorted. We don't need to have a census now to correct what has been done wrong. We are not we don't need a redistribution of the districts on the basis of a new census. The census that was the basis for the present redistribution of the districts needs to be corrected because it's wrongly done. It has been done with the purpose of fraud, and they have done their fraud. They actually conquered what they wanted to do. They have the Congress with the distortion that we mentioned before.
It's tipped the scales in favor of the Mas party, undoubtedly.
Yep.
And I think the clearest example is what you just said. Evo won with in Bolivia, the president wins by popular vote. And if Evo took 54%, but between the House and Senate, he had 64% in that election.
Right.
And
something is wrong.
Yeah, something's going on there.
That's true.
Let's see. Going into this. Well, we'll stick with talking about the Mas and getting themselves elected. Let's talk about Evo's candidacy. So, for those of you who don't know or don't follow the news locally that closely, Evo Morales is his latest strategy, I guess, to get back into power in some way, and I think he has obviously ulterior motives, or is running for a Senate seat, for the Mas party, obviously in Cochabamba. There's a lot of issues there. Some interesting thing, something you touched on, was respect to the legalities of this, is that a lot of people are saying, and I don't know if other people have come out and said that, your counter argument that's actually favors Evo Morales is that the argument is that, well, he's not a resident. In the law states that you have to be a resident in the district or the area you're running for 2 years prior to the election.
Right.
Which obviously, having him out of the country since November 10th or November, whatever, early November, he's got November, December, January, February, up until May. That's more than 6 months that he's not residing in Cochabamba or much, let alone in Bolivia. And you brought up a case that actually involved a masista, Rebecca Delgado,
right?
Did I get the name?
Right.
Who brought an international court a claim, basically that the Mas, she was kind of a dissident within the party, or she was, I think she spoke out against
a dissident
because after him running for a third term, I think, among other things. And the Mas tried to block her candidacy.
Right.
And based on that argument that she was in La Paz, I believe, and she was running for basically the residency argument.
Office.
Yeah, she was running for an office.
For mayor.
I don't remember what.
No, that was the point. See, the issue was that Rebecca Delgado was a congresswoman. And I think she was a congresswoman twice. That's not too important because the fact that she was a congresswoman. And all of a sudden, she wanted to run for the mayor's office in Cochabamba. So she went and registered herself in order to compete for the mayoral's office in Cochabamba.
Yeah.
And the Mas said, no, she can't do that. He said, why not?
Living in La Paz.
Because the law says that you have to be a resident of Cochabamba for 2 years. And she said, well, I was a congresswoman representing Cochabamba, although I was living in La Paz, but my job was to work for Cochabamba, and I took trips every weekend to Cochabamba, and I visited all the time Cochabamba because I was representing this
Yeah.
land. So they said, no, rejected. See, the tribunal, the electoral tribunal was masista, so they said, no, rejected. She was not obviously content with this. So she reached beyond the borders of Bolivia, and she went to an organization that's called the Committee of Human Rights of the United Nations. And I didn't know this because I knew there was some kind of international ruling, but not of this body. I thought it was the Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos. Yeah, but it wasn't
CIDH.
that. Yeah, she went to the United Nations.
Okay.
And she went through a process there, submitted her demand, her suit, and then went all the way to the end. By the end, it resulted that the International Court ruled the following. They said, even though she did not live in Cochabamba, her job implied that she had to go every weekend to Cochabamba, and she was the representative of Cochabamba, and the ties, the job ties and her trips make her legally she can
and there's a reasonable assumption that she's still aware of the goings on and
that was the issue.
The issues pertinent to
because
the needs
when
of
you're
the
not a
people of
resident,
Cochabamba.
good that you touched that. When you're not a resident, the presumption is that you don't know anything about what's happening there. So it's a correct presumption, because if you don't know anything about what happens in Cochabamba, how can you vote or how can you be elected there?
Sure.
That's a good argument. But she defended herself with a good argument. She said, I went there every weekend. I represented Cochabamba. So I could work still for Cochabamba, living in Cochabamba this time as the mayor of Cochabamba. So went to the United Nations, won her case. Okay. Take note of this. The arguments, okay, because that applies to Evo.
Yeah.
Not to Evo in Argentina. Evo is running for the Senate as a senator of Cochabamba. He can be observed because he did not reside in Cochabamba.
Yeah.
Okay, he resided in La Paz.
Yep.
So one part of the argument is going to be that he didn't live in Cochabamba. How can you be a senator of Cochabamba? You didn't live here since 2005. So he's going to respond what Mrs. Delgado responded. He's the
president of Cocoa Growers Union in Chapare,
right, and he goes over there all the time and blah blah. So he's going to come out with a jurisprudence, international jurisprudence from Rebecca Delgado,
which is ironic.
Right? But he's going to have a second observation. Not only that he lived in La Paz, in the last 6 months, they'll say he lives away from Bolivia, out of the country. So it's not just that now he's no longer the president of Bolivia, traveling to Cochabamba all the time. He really was not in Bolivia and obviously not in Cochabamba for the last 6 months. So he will have another response to that.
Mario Cosillo.
I think I sent it to you, but there is what it's called in law. This is doctrine. The Comisión de Venecia, I don't know if you're aware with that. The Comisión de Venecia is just a name, because actually this is a human rights commission from the from the EU, from European Union. Yeah. They have some type of commission that sees and studies and analyzes human rights in the political realm. And they have become a good source of analysis and of doctrine.
Okay.
In law, doctrine is very important because it influences in lawsuits. So what the Commission of Venecia concluded, because there were cases in the EU where people with refugee status wanted to represent or participate in elections in their country. The conclusion of the EU is the following. They say a person that is not in his or her country for reasons that are not his own will can participate, especially if they have a refugee status.
As a refugee.
Yeah, can participate in elections because the last residence of this person is still his residence.
Okay,
In
so
other
their
words,
last willful residence.
right,
Okay, is the residence that
in
counts.
this case, Evo Morales' residence can be counted as Bolivia or Cochabamba.
So-
because he's in Argentina, not because he wants to be there, because he's being persecuted.
So both arguments would go in his favor.
Yeah,
That's
both
the way you
arguments
see it.
will go in his favor.
Yeah.
It's good that what you just touched is very important,
And-
because this morning I had an exchange of views with a person that is very well respected in La Paz, and he had been a member of cabinet from Mr. Mesa. Actually, he's an Italian guy that lives in La Paz, and he must be a Bolivian citizen because he's been in Mesa's cabinet. And he wrote to me, and he said, you know, he's a very bright guy, but he said, but obviously he's very worried about Evo Morales, you know. He said, but this is a state interest, you know. It's a way elevated interest, and he cannot participate, you know. Obviously, that's not an argument, you know. That's a human rights issue.
Yeah.
And Evo Morales, I think, will win this. If he doesn't win this, and he's not allowed to participate, warning, he will have an issue for years to come, because this will become a really big political issue. If you take away his human rights, his participation rights, he'll go to all the courts in the world and will win everywhere in the world, because there is too much doctrine and jurisprudence with this. It's not his only case. Apparently, this happens worldwide. So he will win wherever he goes.
Going back to Rebecca Delgado, she had the ruling came out in her favor.
The ruling came out in her favor,
and
of course.
But it was too late. That's what we talked about this before we were recording.
Oh yeah, it was
so
too
the
late.
difference here is that even in the same instant, let's say the electoral court or tribunal here doesn't allow him to run.
Right.
Well, I guess that ruling would have to come out. That has to come out before the election. They have to either decide whether he can or can't run before the election, right?
Yeah.
International
ruling will never come out before.
I think they have
election.
a week, correct?
Well, the electoral court, yes. Here, yes.
Yeah.
So the electoral court can say yes or no. He can participate or not. My feeling is that they'll vote for yes, because it's obvious he has the right to do it.
Yeah.
If they say no,
and I mentioned Mario Cosillo before because that's I think I read that in Página 7 or some article citing Evo Morales. He says, well, if Mario Cosillo can run, he's running for I think a Senate seat as well as for Tarija, right? Mario Cosillo, for anybody who doesn't know, he was the governor, right? And for political persecution reasons, he sought asylum in
Paraguay.
Paraguay, and he just came back maybe a week or two ago.
Yeah,
and so it's the same argument can be made against him that he's been out of the country for much longer than Evo, for years,
9 years, I think. Yeah,
and he's only been back for 2 weeks, and so just based on that, how can you let him run and not Evo? If they, at least my opinion is if that were to be the case, if there's a ruling in favor of Cosillo and against Evo, then it's clearly they're not being
or they can reject
impartial.
both of those cases.
They could,
which would be unwise, juridically and politically.
Yeah.
If Evo is rejected, he'll have the reason to have a very international campaign on this, and his image will grow. Yeah, because he's right. It will be a plight.
No, I'll agree with you.
Plight,
and all signs point to
right. So
to that being the case.
I think both are against the interest of the opposition of the MAS. But I think the least damaging one is that he becomes a senator. That's it. Let him go in there and fight with all the rest of the senators and diputados and see what he can do in the next 5 years.
There's another legal issue that comes into play there. A lot of people, or a lot of comments I've seen that he's doing it because he's not going to become president by becoming senator. There'd have to be a chain of events. Exactly. Almost as miraculous as what happened to get him out of office for that to happen.
Right.
But there is a case where I think any elected senator has immunity in terms of if there's criminal charge. There can't be a criminal process carried out against an acting senator. Am I mistaken or not?
For acts that had been performed while he was a senator.
Ah, okay. So,
right. But if there are acts that are being
prior.
performed before, that has nothing to do with him being a senator.
Okay.
The issue is you cannot persecute a senator for political reasons for things he has done while he was a senator.
While in office. Okay.
Yeah, but if you killed somebody before you became a senator, yeah, you can go to jail even if you're a senator.
Okay.
Just grab you
So that's a
Yeah, that's not a good analysis.
Yeah, it's a misled argument, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, that's something I'd seen things about that, and I wondered. But that's comforting and reassuring.
Yeah. He can be tried. Yeah, he can be.
Okay, which is he's in an interesting position.
Mm-hmm.
You think he's going to try to come back into the country? Well, now we'll go into speculation. You think he's going to try to cross the border or not? Do you think politically it's advantageous for him to cross the border? All signs point to him being arrested as quickly as possible once he would do that. To play like the victim card.
I think that if he's elected senator,
Mm-hmm.
he'll come to Bolivia.
Not beforehand. So you think
No, not before that.
He's going to run from out this.
He's going to run from outside. Yeah.
Okay.
But if he gets elected, he's going to come in, and it'll be impossible to get him in jail.
Why?
Because he's too big of a political figure to go in jail.
But
it's hard to put people in jail when they're big political figures.
Okay.
Anywhere in the world.
But not based. But just having senator status or that title, I mean, why would
that adds to his figure? He's a senator. He's being just reelected.
Mm-hmm.
People voted for him. Even knowing all these issues that are being discussed, they voted for him. He's the representative of all these people that voted for him.
Okay.
So I don't think that they'll dare putting him in jail. Because there's no reason, because he would have to have. Okay, let's explain this. Why would he go to jail? He would have to have a sentence against him.
Or what do they call that? The detención preventiva or whatever. That's if there's a flight risk.
But that's a good. Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Detención preventiva is preventive detention.
Uh-huh.
That's the exception to the rule. The rule in the world is that you're a free man.
Yep.
Until you're proven guilty of committing a crime. Okay. When you're guilty is when the trial ends. After many years of trial, it ends and they say, "Oh, this guy really killed somebody," and then they put you in jail forever or for whatever number of years. But before that, you can only go to jail if justice thinks that you can fly away, you can disappear, or if you can influence the process because you're too powerful and you can go and get the witnesses and oblige them to speak.
Tamper with them.
Tamper them and all that stuff. Yeah, right. So those are the two reasons why people are put in jail while they're in a process.
During a trial.
Yeah, during a trial.
Yeah.
Because one is they have to have almost a certainty that you're going to get away from the country, and two, you're too dangerous and you're going to tamper witnesses. Right. That's the only. If they don't prove those things, you're free until the whole process ends. And as you know, processes end in years anywhere in the world. In Bolivia,
Yep.
Not only years, decades. So it's very hard. There's no reason to jail him if he comes here as a senator, because there's no flight risk. He'll say,
"He's got steady employment.
I want to be. He has steady employment. I want to be a senator." The only argument there with tampering, because you're too powerful.
There's a pretty strong argument there.
Yeah. You're too powerful, and you can really put obstacles in the investigation. That still, I don't think they would take the risk to put him in jail. That will make him much bigger, even. I don't think so. I think that he would just come and become a senator.
And if you ask me, he doesn't, knowing how much pull he has in Cochabamba, he doesn't need to be here to win. I don't think so. I think he'll
win.
Yeah, he's going to take on landside right in Cochabamba. Yeah. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't who won't agree with that.
Right. But that opens a whole chapter in Bolivian politics, right? Evo back in Bolivia in Congress.
Yeah, but well, I guess we'll have to see. You know, if the MAS takes a majority, if they don't, then
Right.
you know how much influence.
See the importance of gerrymandering at this point?
Yes.
He cannot have half of the people in Congress. As things are right now, he can get a 30% vote and have what, 40, almost 50% of the people in Congress. That's dangerous, Evo. But if you do the right gerrymandering, the corrections to gerrymandering, if he gets 30% of the vote, he'll have 30% of Congress. And that's it. He'll just be there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know, the other, well, I'm not an expert on this topic by any means, but another argument for the mapping, the way it's done in those districts, is to give fair representation to areas that otherwise would be underrepresented and never have their interests, right? Well, I mean, I'm talking about rural areas, you know, I mean, if you just base on a popular vote and you basically means, you know, what guarantees that people, let's say a country, an imaginary country with 15% rural population, you know, obviously they have very different needs and interests than the 85% that's in the urban area. And so, but what gives them any guarantee or political pull that their needs and interests are going to be met if they're so, you know, underrepresented? I mean, if you just base it proportionally on their.
No, that's a good question.
And so I think there's also.
It has a good response, though.
What's that?
Congress has two phases. The lower chamber is a representation, the demographic representation.
The deputies.
The upper chamber is not demographic; it's geographical.
Okay. Same as
in the States,
in the States,
and in Bolivia, right?
Okay.
It's the same thing. So if you are from Pando, in Bolivia, you'll have the same number of senators as if you were from Santa Cruz.
Right.
So you're tied there. You're well represented if you're Pandino. Not in the lower chamber.
Yeah, there's proportionally based on. Okay, it's the same as.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Oh, all right.
I know that because I had been a representative from Pando before.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a deputy from Pando back in the 80s, and I know by heart all that discussion because we were, when I lived in Pando, we were.
You lived in Cobija.
In Cobija, yeah.
In the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s.
Wow.
We didn't reach 50,000 people. I think we were like 40,000 people, and we had.
For the whole department.
Right.
Okay.
Right. While La Paz and Santa Cruz had millions of people.
Yeah.
And we had a number of representatives in the House of Deputies that was way above our true representation.
Okay.
Demographically. Our argument was that, you know, no, we're so little that, you know, we need to have a minimum. There was a minimum threshold. Okay. And there's still a minimum threshold today. Yeah, you can. A department cannot have less than a number X of deputies. Yeah.
Okay.
No matter if he has 10 people
so there
living
are safeguards.
there. Yeah, there are that safeguard, and then they invented a new safeguard, which really distorted things. But that's how this country works. Back in the 90s, Potosí was a highly populated department in Bolivia for centuries.
Yeah.
Right, because
the
the mining was there. Okay, but since the 80s, it started losing people by tons.
Yeah,
people were just living there.
Potosí is like the Detroit of.
Right, exactly. yes, the Detroit of Bolivia. Where did they go? To the Chapare. You knew that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're no longer there, and when they started losing people, we started. Rewriting the Constitution and again gerrymandering Bolivia, and we said, you know, you can't have that number of people. He said, why not? Because you lost people. Potosí had I don't know what 25 House members. We said, no, you can't have 25 House members. You have to have 20. Oh, big problem in Bolivia because they have their own historical arguments. They say we have been the supported Bolivia for centuries, ever since the colonialism.
You owe it to us.
Yeah, we owe it to us. You cannot take our deputies away. and they they introduced a factor for calculating the number of deputies that was in relationship to your development. Poor departments have to have more representation than rich departments, and that's part of the mathematics now. It's part
Still.
of the, yeah. It's still there. Yeah, so it's a complicated issue, but still there has to be gerrymandering because that can be corrected easily. What happened in the early part of the mass government. Yeah,
Okay.
that can be corrected. All these other issues are not going to be corrected. The Pando issue and the Potosí is probably not. You don't even have to touch that. But the mass issue, yes, because that was overtly done in order to favor Evo
Yeah,
Morales. Yeah.
sure. Talk about the other candidates. Well, since it was Monday night or Tuesday night, it's Monday night, right? When they had was the deadline for the
Monday.
to present, officially to what do you call that? To subscribe, not subscribe, register. Thank you. My English is failing me. Well, I guess there's not really any surprises, not at least with any of the candidates that I consider significant, or candidates that have a real potential to win. What does fascinate me a little bit is the veracity of the how do you say guerra sucia in English?
Dirty war.
The dirty war. There's mudslinging, I guess, towards Janine Yanez in her can. I mean, we talked about it a little bit last week on last Saturday, but she's being attacked on all sides. I'm not saying whether I'm in favor or against her, but it's really impressive. And calls my attention to see just how hard they're hitting her, and or at least the effort that this early on to damage her image. And I don't know. I'm trying to think of something specific in terms of what's been going on with this. Sorry, I'm
Well,
help me out here.
the Camacho campaign is being run, or let's put it in a different way, has asesores, counselors, U.S. counselors.
Yeah, McLean.
No.
Or
That's
somebody.
the Bolivian version of it.
Oh, okay.
They have really gringo guys working there.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have.
Do you think he's listening to him?
Huh?
Do you think he's taking their advice? At least
Oh,
up
yeah.
at the,
I'm certain of it.
okay.
Because dirty war is everywhere.
Yeah.
But in my experience, dirty war in the U.S. has been methodically studied,
Mhm.
and it's very effective. I had seen that in previous campaigns when I was in politics.
Mhm.
I had seen how a candidate can be destroyed mathematically. When they came to the U.S., I don't recall what election the year. It doesn't matter the year, but because it's so many decades back. But Reyes Villa was like in the 40s in all the polls,
Yeah.
and Goni was like in
He was
18,
way down.
19,
Uh-huh.
and these guys came and they say we're gonna drop this guy all the way down, and they did it because they had 2 or 3 issues with which they attacked him consistently, permanently, and scientifically.
Mhm.
They do it all the time, and they know how to do this very well. I had also seen the same thing back in the election of 1993.
Mhm.
We are the MNR, and Goni was our candidate then.
Yeah.
And there was there was a candidate from UCS was Max Fernandez.
Yeah.
Okay, and Max Fernandez was a threat to us, a real threat, because he was a big populist.
Mhm.
He didn't have too much of an argument, but he is a populist. He didn't know too much about issues, Bolivian issues, because he was not a studious guy. But that didn't matter because people just loved him. People, a very popular part of the population loved him. So there come the gringos, and with all their methods. And it was really funny because, again, this was the first time that I've seen it firsthand because I was close in the campaign to them. And then I went to the Ministry of Communications, and they were my advisors.
Okay.
So I learned how they worked, and they were very efficient. They knew how to do it. The dirty work was one proficiently by them.
So you think we're just getting started, seeing what we're seeing against Añez? I got hung up a second.
This is their
I
work.
lost my train of thought.
This is their work. They're doing it right, and it's dangerous because they do it right. Unless,
but it seems like there's a lot of things that are coming out. Okay, the example the other day where there was that we were talking about this on Saturday with Carlos. About the meeting, the supposed meeting that the Comité Pro Santa Cruz called to try to unify the parties that are
big lie.
The parties that
was a big lie.
Yeah, it was. I think that
they invited Añez in order to insult her.
Yeah, Camacho. If anybody who doesn't know, Camacho got up to the podium when it was his turn to speak, and he said that we have political actors that have been asylees in other countries during a fair part of Abel's time in office, Maricosillo, Branco Markovic, etc., who've come back into the country. And Camacho on the podium started pointing a finger and saying, and he also said she was ignorant. She said, you might not know this, but your minister, Murillo, and I think he named two, I can't remember the other one was.
No, Murillo, basically.
It has threatened these guys who've just come back from years in asylum abroad, threatening to continue the judicial processes against them if they support my candidacy, Camacho's candidacy, and I think it backfired. Murillo got up on when it was his turn to speak, and
that was pretty good.
He tore it, and I'm not going to get vulgar, but he tore him a new one, and had a much the answer that what he came back with was very powerful and very convincing.
Right.
And that's one instance where, that's why I said, do you think Camacho's paying attention or listening to what these advisors are telling him? Because every time he tries, it seems like he tries to do something to boost his image. It comes, it shoots, it backfires.
Right.
It happened there. At least that's the way I saw it. And I think most people saw it. It happened when they leaked the recordings of the conversations with Pumardi. And I think there's a third one that escapes me right now. But he just that's why I said, if you get these super amazing advisors, then why does everything keep backfiring on the guy? or is that just my bias? I don't know.
We would have to see statistics. This is true, because that's something I've learned with them, with these advisors, marketing, political marketing. They're really good. When I was in the ministry, I used to believe things in La Paz that were not true, but I was convinced that they were true, because everybody around me talked in the sense that I thought. But then when you did all these tests in society, people were thinking totally different than what I and my surroundings were hearing all the time. Yeah, it can be very tricky. What you hear around you is not necessarily what people are talking in the country.
The majority.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That's a tricky issue, and you only know when you do a poll, because you have to know what people. I mean, it has to be a good poll in order to get all these opinions of the different parts of the population. But see, we don't know whether this worked for him or not. But regardless of whether it worked or not, I always want to point out when I talk about this Saturday's meeting is that this was planned. The invitation was from the Comité Cívico.
Yep.
Who is the president of the Comité Cívico now? I don't care. But the real president of the Comité Cívico now is Camacho, because he was the president of the Comité Cívico until November.
Yep.
The people that are now there are his people, because he was elected with a group of people. These are his friends.
As far as I know, the only change has been the guy who was right under the vice president, I guess,
became president. And that was it.
That's it. There have been no other internal changes.
They were the team. So the team invites all the political parties in order to try to unite a front. Okay? Who invites? The Comité Cívico. Who is the Comité Cívico? Camacho is the Comité Cívico. He invites all these people in order to unite. The guests come in. Camacho speaks. Does he try to unite? No. He insults one of them. Exactly the contrary, He's not stupid, He is not stupid. He knows the difference between inviting somebody and trying to unite them or inviting somebody and insulting them. So he did the latter. He insulted them. That was planned. He didn't make a mistake. What he said that day, that Saturday, wasn't something that came out to his mind.
Yeah, it wasn't spontaneous.
No. He was planned. Yeah, definitely.
I don't doubt that.
So definitely, that meeting was a farce. And that was not denounced by the opposition parties, by the parties that went there, as clearly as we're speaking right now. They still think that, or at least outwardly, they speak about a meeting that was supposed to unite. No, it was a meeting that was invited to unite, but it was a meeting planned by the Comité Cívico in order to destroy Janine Áñez. That was the whole plan there.
So coming, what I think this shows us is that I don't know if they've got inside information or if they've done polls that aren't releasing and that kind of, the advisors, is that Áñez is the major contender.
Oh yeah.
It's going to come down to, I don't know, my if I had to guess at this point, and assuming nobody drops out against, Mas is going to take first place, and it's going to be between Áñez and, I'd say Áñez and Mesa. Camacho is he's got a lot of, he carries a lot of weight in Santa Cruz, but outside of Santa Cruz.
What you're saying, and I'm trying not to put words in your mouth, but
go ahead.
All the dirty work that Camacho is doing will benefit Mesa.
Yeah.
in a way, that's what will happen, in your opinion. I share that opinion. Because all he's doing is he's showing his face to do the dirty work. He's doing personally the dirty work. So whoever does personally the dirty work ends up worse than trash and is benefiting a third party, in this case, Mesa. But it'll hurt her. I think that it'll hurt her. What we will probably see in the next 2 or 3 weeks is that there's going to be a more dispersed dirty war. I think they will attack Camacho also. I don't know who, but somebody will attack Camacho.
It's bound to happen sooner or later.
It has to happen, yeah. It has to happen. The guy that has proved that doesn't do dirty work, the dirty war, is Mesa. Yeah, because they attacked him so much last time, and he never responded. That was a good strategy. He never responded. Whenever I asked him whether he received that $1 million in order to participate in the elections of 19,
he'd say he wasn't going to participate.
He said he could not answer that because that was dirty war.
Yep.
That was it. He said that 1,000 times, and it really didn't hurt him because he became second in the end. Yeah. So I think that it'll be interesting. I think the dirty war will spread to Camacho. I think that is bound to happen, and maybe to Mesa again. And we'll see just this big salad that will be very confusing in a month from today.
What do you think is going to happen in terms of what strategy is going to be used against the MAS, against Luis Arce? In terms of, because it's not against Evo, I mean. In any camp, obviously the each party is going to look for ways to lower votes among the parties they're contending with. But what are the strategies that
did you read? Did you have a chance to read that newspaper from the U.S.?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was surprised at that.
Interesting.
Yes, because they are still holding. There are people in the U.S., serious people, institutions that hold that there was a coup d'état in Bolivia. So warning. If people are thinking like that in the world, the more people go in jail in Bolivia from the MAS, the more that version of the coup d'état becomes quote unquote true.
Yeah. There's even local. Do you see the op-ed or the editorial in Página 7? It was either yesterday or today about the political jailings, I guess you'd say.
Right.
The what do you call it? The legal representative of Evo Morales to register him for the candidacy.
Right. Yeah.
There was no order of apprehension.
Why exactly?
And they grabbed her.
That was just
and threw her
political.
in jail. Yeah, and
Right.
so it is happening.
It is happening.
And that's also gonna. Well, that's gonna definitely.
That has to
rise.
quit, because if it doesn't quit, it'll keep growing, and Agnes will look like a general
Mhm.
doing his coup d'état.
She's also
And,
like a hypocrite, because that's what the Mas did for.
Right.
The Mas was really good at that.
Mhm.
But I'm interested in seeing what kind of strategies are going to be deployed by the parties that are up against the Mas in terms of,
My bet is that they will not attack the Mas too much, except for Janine Áñez from the government, with all the juridical aggression. I don't think so. I think it's shown up to this point. The enemy right now is Janine Áñez, because they want Mesa and Camacho want to go to the second round, whether it be against each other or whether it is against the Mas. But they feel that the person that's not supposed to be in this dance is Janine.
Is Áñez.
Yeah. And I think the whole fight will be between those parties, like in the first election of the 20th of October.
It's exactly the same, right?
Yeah, exactly the same.
Uh-huh.
It's a problem of all these parties between each other, but not against the Mas. And I think that the only enemy of the Mas, the real enemy of the Mas, is government. Mr. Murillo from the Ministry of Government, and some other people from the government. But basically, it's Janine Áñez's government. And I think she won't quit. I think she'll keep doing that.
I guess we'll see. We got May 3rd. That's 3, 4, in February. 3 months.
Right.
March, April. Yeah, about just over 3. Yeah, almost exactly 3 months from now. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
Not for the moment. I think we can anytime we can come and do another recording. But up to this point, this will be it. And let's see what will happen next couple of days, and then we can comment more. We'll have Saturday the version in Spanish, so that will keep us up.
Yep.
With the news.
Those that are listening, if you are bilingual or understand Spanish, we are doing the show in Spanish as well. We're trying to keep them on par. Do for each one in English, one in Spanish. So feel free to keep listening and sharing any ideas that you have or comments. And thanks for listening. Thanks,
you.
Ernesto.
Yeah,
Always a pleasure.
For me too. It was very exciting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, until next time.